Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. People need to regularly buy silver and gold because they need to do their best to change their brainwashing. Even after I knew that silver and gold were real money and that paper dollars were not, I found it hard to make myself emotionally believe it. My mind still rebelled against believing it. I intellectually knew that they were money, gold and silver, but the normalcy bias, or whatever you want to call it, my whole lifetime of conditioning gave me cognitive dissonance when I tried to really make myself realize and believe the truth of what I knew intellectually was true, which is that gold and silver are money, and paper money is just worthless paper with zero true value. It took a few years for me to really overcome that conditioning, just like it took me 20 years to fully undo the brainwashing of religion. And it's not like I grew up in a cult or anything. Raising any kid with any religion is a form of brainwashing. And similarly, it's brainwashing to raise a kid to believe that paper money is money, or that digits in a bank are money. Digits in a bank or paper money is not money. Rare things which cannot be created are money. Things like gold, silver, platinum, etc. I think I'm probably 70 to 80% of the way toward overcoming the brainwashing of fiat currency, but I also don't think I'm completely there yet. And it's been 6 years since I first got red-pilled about precious metals by watching precious metals channels on YouTube. So I suggest you start buying precious metals as soon as possible, and that you thereby start undoing the brainwashing that we all grew up with, so that you can get your mind right by seeing things how they really are. By seeing that precious metals are true money and paper dollars and digital dollars in the bank are not money. That has to be your default understanding, your default emotional grasp, because intellectually knowing it is not quite enough. You gotta really feel it and believe it, But despite the fact that you should think of your wealth in ounces, like ounces of gold, ounces of silver, whatever, unless you're, which other people have said, this is not an original insight of mine, other people have said this, but, I think it's true. It was hard to even understand or accept at first, really, but just like it was hard to emotionally grasp that paper money was not money and silver and gold were. But other people said that you should count your wealth in ounces, not in dollars, and I agree. I'm coming around more and more to understanding that. Unless you're passing it all down to your kids. But even though you should count your wealth in ounces, at the same time, unless you're passing it all down to your kids, you'll also need to simultaneously think of your silver or gold stash in terms of dollars, or preferably purchasing power. You need to make sure that you're saving enough gold or silver in order to retire. And retiring will mean slowly selling off your gold or silver holdings in order to get cash, to buy food and pay for medications and other things so that you can continue to survive after you retire. So, the dollar value of your gold or silver do matter if you plan on ever selling them. But really what's important is the purchasing power. So it's probably best to do what Belang P recommends and figure out how much money in dollar terms that you need to retire, or rather that you would need if you were to retire today. It doesn't matter how much things go up in price in the future, because your gold or silver will go up in price as well, thus keeping you locked in terms of purchasing power. So you figure out how many dollars you would need if you were to retire today, and you figure out how early you want to retire, and how long you're likely to live after retiring, and therefore how much money you need to retire. And you also have to take into account whether the purchasing power of gold is likely to be in a bull market or a bear market while you're retired. You also have to take the premiums that you pay into account. You also should leave yourself a buffer after that, making sure that you save more than you think that you'll need because of Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. In other words, shit happens. In other words, be prepared for the unexpected. Be prepared for bad luck. So, you find out how many dollars you're going to need for your retirement, and then you start saving that much, adding more for the premiums you'll pay, and whether your precious metal is likely to be in a bull or bear market, and a buffer for bad luck, and also taking into account the fact that your wages will be going down year after year due to inflation. That also has to be taken account of, It's not just, inflation doesn't just rob your savings, it robs your yearly wages. Unless, of course, you're getting a raise each year without getting a promotion, and that raise is enough to cover inflation. It's 5% or whatever. Otherwise, you are taking a pay cut every year. Yeah, it has to be taken into account when you're figuring out how many precious metals you'll be able to buy in the future, and whether you'll be able to accrue enough by the time you retire so that you'll have enough to retire. You know what I mean? And you also should be as frugal as possible. As you can be, especially in the early years of your working life, so that you can save as much as humanly possible during those years, so that you can accrue a lot more metal than you need to in order to make up for the fact that in later years you might not be able to buy as much metal as you need because of your wages having stayed the same despite inflation, and thus that meaning that you have been, you took a pay cut, right? Like inflation means you're taking a pay cut. Now, some people might say that it doesn't matter if the price of gold or silver stays where it is, but that's a view that is not comprehensive enough because the cost of food and other things will also be going up. And so even if the price of the metal stays right where it is for 10 or 20 years, the higher cost of everything else means that the guy will be able to save less of his paycheck because the cost of everything else having risen. So, inflation may not be happening seemingly in the price of gold or silver, but, he's having to spend a bigger and bigger percentage of his paycheck every month or year on, food and all the rest of it because that stuff is going up with inflation, right? So that means that he has less money left over at the end of the year, or, at the end of the month, after every paycheck, he has less money left over to, buy gold and silver with. So even if the metals prices stay the same for years and years, he still will be only able to buy less and less metal because of the price of everything else going up, And if the price of metals are also going up, it also, like I said, you'll be able to buy less precious metal than the year before. So you need to take all that into account when figuring out how much money to put into precious metals each month so that you will eventually have enough for your retirement when you're old. But as long as you know that you're going to have enough, and you're planning on killing yourself instead of retiring, or whatever, as long as you know that you're going to have more than enough precious metal compared to what you need, then you will be able to think of your wealth in terms of ounces after that point. Just counting how many ounces you have rather than like worrying about whether you're, saving enough so that you can, be able to retire. Once you have more than enough to retire, or you're saving way more every month than will be necessary for you to retire, so you know that by the time you retire, you'll have way more than enough. Well, then you can, think of your savings in terms of, purchasing power or ounces rather than in terms of dollars, because then the dollar amount will really be irrelevant because you'll have more than enough to retire when the time comes. You really should measure your wealth in ounces, like precious metals enthusiasts say that you should. And you also should only consider those precious metals yours if you have them in your house or have them buried somewhere where only you know the location of them. In other words, you need to remember the saying, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. This is a very important and true saying that, precious metals people are very familiar with. And if that should make intuitive sense to you, but if it doesn't, you should drill it into your head because that is a really, really important thing to understand. Putting it in a bank, they can absolutely confiscate that, like Rickards said. But Rickards, in his book, The New Case for Gold, he's acting like, it's way safer in private vault storage. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? All the government has to do is do an executive order or pass a law in the middle of the night, like they do all the time, and then, have that law say, and nobody reads the laws except for the politicians. The politicians don't even always read the laws. Remember that law a few years back? Oh, we got to pass it to find out what's in it. I mean, that's insane, right? This is how these politicians are. They're absolutely evil, power-hungry, corrupt Illuminati puppets. You know what I mean? And so it really is the case that they would just pass a law instantly at the end of the night, in the middle of the night, when no one has the chance to get them to stop from passing it, and it'll say the U.S. can confiscate all the metals, even in all the private vaults. You are not going to save your metal by putting it in a private vault like Brinks or Loomis or whatever. You're not. I'm sorry, but you're not. I mean, the crash we're heading toward is so huge, and every time they kick the can, it guarantees that when it does happen, it'll be even bigger. It's so huge that the government will do absolutely anything to survive. And Rickards has even said that in his book. In that same book, Rickards said that, you have to understand that, like, governments are these, like, desperate, rapacious things or whatever that, like, will do whatever it takes to survive. And he's right, but then that makes me think, like, why in the world does he think private bank vault storage would be, safe, considering he himself said earlier in the book that, the governments will do literally whatever it takes to survive. Not the individuals in the government, but the government itself is like an entity. It's like a living thing. It doesn't want to die. It doesn't want to shrink. It doesn't want to go on a diet. And it doesn't want to give up its authority or power. So it will do whatever it takes to maintain the power that it has and the wealth that it has and everything. So it will absolutely steal all the money in private vault storage. So really, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. If you don't have it hidden, buried somewhere, in some, random, place out there, the Arizona desert or wherever, if you don't have it buried somewhere else or, hidden in the walls of your house or hidden somewhere else in your house, if you don't have your precious metals, either, nearby or somewhere where no one else is going to find them and you can easily get to them, like, some just desert in Arizona that no one's guarding or anything. You can easily get there. There's no fences, nothing. Like, if that's not the case, then, like, if you're keeping it in a vault, or whether it's private or whether it's a bank, it doesn't matter. Like, that is not yours. If you don't hold it, you don't own it. That is just, it's really that simple. If you don't fully appreciate the power of the government to confiscate almost everything that you don't have under direct control, such as it being hidden in your house and you having a gun with which to keep the cops out, or preferably keeping your precious metals in a commune and everyone having the guns to keep the cops out of the commune, if you don't fully appreciate the government can and will outlaw gold and silver when they have to, then you don't understand government and you don't understand the value of gold and silver. Part of the value of them is their anonymity. Part of the value of them is that you can keep them under your direct control, so that the government cannot take your precious metals without taking them from your cold, dead hands, much like your guns. And if they try to take your precious metals by force, you can make them pay a price in blood for having done so, or for having tried to do so. And that's another reason to live, densely, many people to a house, like in Fight Club with Project Mayhem, or to live in or it's another, reason to live in a commune, because, you have a lot of people doing the same subversive activity. And if the government doesn't like it and tries to steal from or bully those people, then the government will not just have to go up against one husband with one gun, or one single MGTOW guy with one gun to protect his precious metals, which they could pretty easily do with a whole SWAT team, but they'll have to go up against hundreds of well-armed men who are all living in the same house or the same commune, and who are all willing to die to keep the government out of the commune. That's a totally different story. The government does not like doing stuff like that. The government is a coward, and it only likes to fight battles that it can win easily. So that's a battle the government would not want to fight, because it would be much more difficult to win and much more damaging to the government's reputation if the government did win, because they'd have to burn the commune to the ground and kill all the men, women, and children in the commune like Waco, and then it makes the government look terrible. And if the government lost or just, was surrounding the place, but the place never gave up, it would just make the government look stupid. And then everybody would realize, holy crap, we can totally defy the government. Look at them. They did it. We can do it too. And then tons of people would start defying the government, and the government would lose total control over the populace, and then we'd be free again. And the government does not want that, I've said this before, but, you need to appreciate these facts, and so it's worth repeating, which is why I repeat it over and over again, And the last thing I want to say about this topic is that you need to avoid thinking of your precious metals in terms of what they should be worth. You should not do a calculation of debt to silver ratio and then find out what should be the true price of silver and then assume that within your lifetime silver will become worth that. Like go, okay, well, gold's, debt to gold ratio says, gold should be whatever, 400,000 an ounce or 100,000 an ounce or 200,000 an ounce, whatever. There's different ways of calculating stuff like what the true value of gold should be, right? So you do a calculation, you're like, okay, the real value of gold should be 200,000 bucks an ounce, So, well, that means, 20 to 1 ratio in the, 18.75 ratio in the ground. That means, silver should be, let's say, to make the math easy, 1/20th the price of gold. So that would make, if it were 1/10 the price of gold and gold's real price were 200,000, that would make silver's real price 20,000, right? So if it's 1/20th, that would make silver's real price about, 10,000 an ounce. You shouldn't be doing that. I mean, you can calculate that like that if you want to, and that's cool, but like you should not be like counting on that. You shouldn't be like, okay, I only have to get enough ounces to where like when the crash happens, silver will go up to 10,000 an ounce and I'll be fine. So I only have to save, 100 ounces or whatever. You should not be thinking that way. You know what I mean? That's very foolish, because what if the crash doesn't happen in your lifetime, or it's not as bad as you think, or you can't, liquidate your gold and silver because it's nationalized, and then, you don't know anybody on the black market to sell it to or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, you should not be relying on the fact that, it could go up way, way, way up. You should, be counting in ounces and counting in real dollar terms and aware of what it should be, but you should not be placing your financial future on the hope that it goes way, way up. You know what I mean? You should just save as much gold and silver as you possibly can. That way you will be, hopefully, at least as okay as possible by the time you reach 65, But the more frugal you live, the more money you can save. And so, that's also why you should live densely populated with other men, whether in a commune or like in a, Project Mayhem type of thing, whatever. You want to be as frugal as possible so you can save as much precious metal as possible, So, what if the price of silver doesn't skyrocket before you retire? You know, if you've not saved enough, then you're screwed. You know, so do the right thing. Buy as much silver as you can each month. It's warfare against the government. As someone else once said, silver is the government's Achilles heel. Let's chip away at that Achilles heel by buying as much silver each month as we can. Unless you're young and just starting your career, in which case you should be working on your career so you can make enough money to buy lots of silver each month later on when you're older, instead of buying small amounts now and neglecting to work on your career. And when I say small amounts, I mean as much as you can afford, but because you don't make good money, you're not buying much. You know what I mean? Like, it's better to work on your career so you can make a lot more money, and then you can buy more gold or silver later on. But at the same time, you know, you should buy a little bit of gold and silver, I think, because you want to at least be, you know, insured. In other words, like, think of gold and silver as like insurance against, you know, an apocalyptic crash. Like, you know, the end of the world as we know it. Like, I'm talking, you know, almost as bad as The Walking Dead or something like that. You know what I mean? Just like super horrific crash, way worse than the Great Depression, right? Like, in case something like that happens, yeah, you do want to have a little bit of gold and silver so that, you know, you'll be able to survive. So you should, even if you're working mainly on your career, you should probably buy, you know, at least a little bit, you know, every month. But, you know, you don't have to like spend all your money every month on gold and silver, because you should be working on your career primarily. You know, career is most important. Then when you're making good money, you can buy lots of precious metals later on and really hurt the system and live a better life yourself as well. Make as much money as you can, live as frugally as you can, buy as much precious metals as you can. And regarding profiting from silver, if gold goes to 10,000 an ounce, which is basically pretty much the bare minimum it would possibly go to if it were revalued by government or something, then if silver went back to the ratio in the ground of 18.75 to 1, so the silver was, you know, 1/18th or basically 1/19th the price of gold, let's say 1/20th, right? That would mean that, you know, silver would be 500 an ounce if gold went up to 10,000 an ounce, which it, like, Rickards basically views, I think, Jim Rickards basically seems to view like 10,000 an ounce as probably the bare minimum of what gold, maybe 5,000, but more like 10,000 an ounce is the bare minimum that gold would be revalued at if the governments of the world all got together and backed the new world reserve currency, whatever it happens to be, whether it's the SDR or the yuan or whatever. Like, you know, whatever that is, that would be, you know, backed by gold, at least partially. And that would require, you know, even partial backing would require a 10,000 an ounce price for gold, right? But, you know, using the M2 money supply and doing 100% gold backing would require a $50,000 price for gold, said Rickards. So, you know, 10,000 is a super conservative estimate for how much gold should be per ounce, or could be in the near future, once the crash happens and the governments have to reset everything and do a new world reserve currency or whatever, you know. But, and if gold were 10,000 an ounce, then silver could easily be 500 an ounce, you know, because that's like, you know, the ground ratio or whatever. But even if it weren't that, even if it only went up to $200 an ounce, that is a ton for silver compared to what it is now. It's 10 times the price it is now. But if it went up to 500 and you have 1,000 ounces, then that would be $500,000 just from having 1,000 ounces of silver that all went up to $500 each. You know, that's enough to buy a house. Like, wouldn't you like to amass 1,000 ounces of silver, and then sometime in the next 30 years, when gold either naturally rises or is officially revalued by the governments of the world, you're able to resell your silver for enough cash to buy a house with? Wouldn't you like that? Or wouldn't you like to buy 1 ounce of gold today and then be able to buy a house with it during an economic collapse / hyperinflation, such as in Venezuela, when just a few years ago you could buy a house, or from what I heard you could buy a house in Venezuela with 1 ounce of gold. You know, wouldn't you like that? That'd be pretty nice, don't you think? The more horrific the crash is, the more you will profit from your precious metals holdings. But even just preserving your purchasing power, saving you from the attrition of inflation, is reason enough to own precious metals. But they're also beautiful. And they also go up in purchasing power more than inflation over time, especially gold. And even if they never go up much, at the very least they've provided insurance in case we have a hyperinflation. You know, you don't regret having bought insurance for your house just because your house did not flood or burn down that year. You know, you're not like, oh, God damn it, why did I have insurance? My house didn't burn down. I was wasting my money. No, you think like, okay, you know, you just got to hold insurance. It's just the cost of having a house. So if something bad happens, you're okay. Well, that's what you view gold and silver as, you know. In one sense, that's one of the ways that you should view gold and silver. Is just like, okay, I got some of it. I got a few ounces of gold. I got a few 100 ounces of silver, or, you know, 1,000 or 2,000 ounces of silver. I'm good. I'm safe. You know, like if a horrific crash happens, I'm going to be fine. Even if I don't prep, buying a bunch of weapons and a bunch of food and a reverse osmosis water filter and solar panels for my house. I don't have any of that stuff. All I have is gold and silver. Well, I can buy that stuff later on with gold and silver because nobody's going to want to be taking dollars, but you'll be able to buy food if you have some gold or silver, or at the very least they'll probably put you in the front of the line. If there's a line to get food, they'll probably be like, okay, everybody who has dollars, stand in this line. Everybody who has silver to the front of the line. And then you'll be able to buy your food before anybody else because you have real money and they don't. You know what I mean? So you just view gold and silver as like insurance. Like if everything goes apocalyptically wrong, which it's looking more and more and more like is going to happen very soon, and it will inevitably happen eventually, probably. Well, you got the insurance in the meantime, so you can sleep easier and stuff. I think Rick Rule or somebody like that said, my gold holdings are what allow me to sleep well at night. And that's really true, man. Like, when I didn't have any gold or silver and I first found out about this whole thing, the fiat currency and the debt and the derivatives and how close we are to financial apocalypse, just teetering on the brink and just kicking the can a little bit more, trying to survive a little bit longer. Like when I first found out about this stuff, I was terrified. Absolutely terrified. I was like, whoa, what do I do? Oh my God, I gotta buy silver. And I was just like freaking out, you know what I mean? And like, I didn't have enough money to buy a ton or anything, so I went and bought a little bit and I was still like, freaking out. It's like, oh my God, I don't have anywhere near enough. And then I bought more and bought more and bought more. And then when I finally had what I felt was like enough, maybe like 80 or 100 ounces. I can't remember when I first started feeling, confident, like secure, like, okay, I feel okay now that like if a crash happens, I have enough. But, the more I bought, the better I felt because, then I felt that like, okay, I have enough to survive a crash now. You know what I mean? And now I'm not really worried about the crash at all. Not because I don't think it'll be horrific or not because I think I'll get rich during the crash or anything because I don't have that much. But like, at the same time, I think like, okay, I have enough silver to where I could probably survive. I could probably not starve to death or something. So, I'm totally okay with the fact that we're, apocalyptically on the brink, financially and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, but until I got, a fair amount of silver, it was really like, I did not like, sleep well at night type of thing. So like it allows you to have peace of mind having that gold or silver there as a buffer, knowing that like if things go wrong and we have a new Great Depression, you're going to be okay. And you don't have to have a ton of silver or gold to have that kind of confidence, that kind of peace, just like 100 or 200, maybe 300 ounces. And you're going to, have a lot more confidence and stuff, especially if you also have some gold. And you should have some silver and some gold. I don't care how big of a silver fan you are, you should have a little bit of gold. And I don't care how big of a fan of gold you are, you should have at least a little silver. Diversification, right? So, even if the price of gold and silver never go up more than inflation, and even if they don't go up as much as inflation, even if we never have an economic collapse or a hyperinflation, a precious metals holder should never regret having held precious metals, because those precious metals were insurance in case something horrible happened in the economy. But if nothing horrible happens, then be grateful. Don't curse gold and silver just because nothing bad happened. This has been Redshift. I hope somebody got something out of this piece.